The envelope sat on my kitchen table, yellowed at the edges, addressed in handwriting I hadn't seen in 4 years. Daniel's handwriting. My husband had been dead since 2022, buried in Oak Hill Cemetery on a rainy October morning. I'd scattered rose petals on his casket. I'd worn black for 6 months. And now, in August 2026, a letter from him had arrived in my mailbox, postmarked 3 days ago. My hands trembled as I turned it over, seeing the wax seal on the back, unbroken. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. This wasn't possible. Daniel and I met at a coffee shop in Portland when I was 24. He'd spilled his latte on my laptop, apologized profusely, and insisted on buying me a new one. We were married 18 months later in a small ceremony by the coast. He was an architect, meticulous and thoughtful, always planning 3 steps ahead. Our life together was quiet and steady. We had a yellow house with blue shutters, 2 cats named Pepper and Salt, and Sunday mornings that smelled like cinnamon rolls. "You're my whole world, Claire," he'd told me on our 5th anniversary, his green eyes serious. I did know. I felt the same way. When he died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition at 32, the world stopped making sense. I moved through the funeral in a fog. His sister Melissa held my hand during the service. His best friend Robert gave the eulogy. I barely remember any of it. 3 weeks after the letter arrived, I still hadn't opened it. I moved it from the kitchen table to my nightstand, then to my desk drawer. I took it out at night, held it up to the light, trying to see through the envelope. Nothing. Finally, on a Thursday evening, my neighbor Karen noticed it when she came over for tea. She asked, pointing at the envelope on the coffee table where I'd left it that morning. "It's from Daniel," I said quietly. Her face went pale. "Your Daniel?" "I know," I interrupted. "It arrived 3 weeks ago." Karen sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Maybe it's something he arranged before he died," she suggested gently. "But why?" She had no answer. That night, alone in my bedroom, I finally broke the seal. The letter inside was dated July 2026, 1 month ago. My vision blurred. The letter explained everything in Daniel's precise, measured handwriting. He hadn't died. The heart attack had been real. The ambulance had been real. But he'd woken up in the hospital 3 days later. By then, I'd already identified a body, held a funeral, and buried someone in his name. "The hospital made a catastrophic error," he wrote. "They mixed up 2 patients. John Morrison, the man in the bed next to mine, died while I was in a coma. His family wasn't reachable immediately. When you came to identify the body, they showed you him." I dropped the letter. My heart hammered. This couldn't be real. It was cruel, impossible. Someone was playing a sick joke. But I kept reading. He'd spent months trying to unravel the legal nightmare, to prove he was alive. The hospital had covered up their mistake. His death certificate was official. Fighting it meant exposing an error that would destroy careers and trigger massive lawsuits. "They offered me money to disappear," he wrote. "A lot of money. Enough to start over somewhere new." I was angry, Claire. I was broken. I sat on my bedroom floor for an hour, the letter spread around me in pages. He'd moved to Vancouver, changed his name to David Brennan, started a new architecture firm. He'd wanted to contact me 100 times. He'd driven to Portland twice, parked outside our house, and couldn't bring himself to knock, he wrote. "How do you tell the woman you love that you let her grieve for a ghost? That you chose money and a fresh start over fighting to come home? I'm a coward, Claire, but I need you to know the truth." The final page had an address in Vancouver and a phone number. I called Melissa immediately. "You need to sit down," I told her. She thought I'd lost my mind. "I have a letter," I said, in his handwriting. Melissa flew to Portland the next day. We sat at my kitchen table, the letter between us. She read it twice, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something like hope. "The scar on his left ankle from the bike accident when he was 9, she whispered, pointing to a line in the letter where he'd mentioned it as proof. She looked up at me, tears streaming. I nodded. We decided to drive to Vancouver together. The address led to a modern apartment building downtown, all glass and steel. I stood outside for 10 minutes before pressing the buzzer for Unit 412. The voice was tinny through the intercom, but unmistakably his. "It's Claire," I said. The longest silence of my life followed. The elevator ride felt like falling. Melissa squeezed my hand. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, he was standing in his doorway. Older, thinner, his hair longer than he'd ever worn it. But Daniel. My Daniel. We stood in his apartment, the 3 of us, and I waited for the relief, the joy, the reunion I'd imagined. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity. "You let me bury a stranger," I said quietly. "You let me cry at a grave that wasn't yours." He stepped forward, hands out. "Claire, I was terrified. I didn't know how to fix it." Melissa's voice was sharp. "You let Mom die thinking you were gone, Danny. She had a stroke last year." His face crumpled. I didn't know. But here's what I realized. Standing in that sterile apartment with a man who looked like my husband but felt like a stranger, Daniel had made a choice. Not once, but every single day for 4 years. He'd chosen the easier path, the path that didn't require courage or sacrifice. Here's the twist I didn't expect. As Daniel begged for forgiveness, his phone buzzed on the counter. A text notification lit up the screen. "See you tonight, love." I saw his eyes flick to it, saw the panic cross his face. I asked. The silence was deafening. He started. Melissa picked up the phone before he could stop her. She scrolled for 10 seconds, then looked at me with something like pity. "He's engaged," she said flatly. "To someone named Amanda." My legs almost gave out. "You wrote me that letter," I whispered. "You told me you never stopped loving me." He ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar it hurt. "I do love you, Claire. I always will. But I had to move on. I thought you had too." "Before you what?" Melissa grabbed my arm. We drove back to Portland in silence. I cried for the first 20 minutes, then stopped. Something inside me had shifted. I'd spent 4 years mourning a man who didn't exist, not because he was dead, but because the Daniel I loved would never have done what he did. The real Daniel, the one who chose convenience over truth, who rebuilt his life while I shattered mine, who could write that letter and still plan a wedding to someone else, I didn't know him at all. Maybe I never had. A week later, I scattered the letter in the fireplace and watched it burn. I kept living in our yellow house with the blue shutters. I kept working at the library. I kept having tea with Karen on Thursdays. But I stopped visiting the grave at Oak Hill Cemetery. There was no one there I needed to mourn anymore. The man I married had died 4 years ago, after all. Just not the way I thought. And somehow, knowing that, I could finally start to let him go. What would you do if someone you'd mourned came back and everything had changed?